Hi, so my name is Phil Macular. I'm from the School of Psychology, University of Glasgow, and along with Helena Patterson, Emily Nordman, and Heather Cleveland-Woods, we're going to show you a little bit about the work we have been doing in regards to creating a curriculum centered on reproducible research within psychology. First, we're going to quickly show you the issue that we perceive, and then we'll show you three different ways we've tried to approach this issue. I will look at reproducible data skills. Helena will look at beyond data skills in terms of other assignments you could use and those ideas. And Heather will finish looking at creating community along with some conclusions. To really get the idea of where this all started, you have to think back into the crux of the reproducibility crisis in 2015, 2016. And really, people were trying to think about how to actually resolve these issues. And this letter in The Psychologist from Kate Button and others thinks about different ways that you can actually resolve publication biases and publication issues, but really goes beyond that and suggests that changing scientific culture can begin at the undergraduate level, instilling the principles of transparency and scientific rigor at the grassroots. So we actually think about how can we go back into undergraduate teaching and how can we change what we teach to improve the future of psychology. And then if we also think about what the QAA states our undergraduate should leave our degree with, then it says that they should be able to demonstrate a range of research skills, including planning, considering, resolving ethical issues, analysis, and dissemination of findings. And the question is really, do we actually teach our students that? So thinking about these 2 points, we started to look at how we actually teach analysis and data skills. And this is the first section I want to cover on reproducible data skills. If we look at this model by Grolman and Wickham about the different stages that we go through when we're analyzing and writing up data, it goes from import on the left-hand side to communicate on the right-hand side. Now, the thing is really that much of traditional teaching focuses on this area here, visualizing, modeling, and communicating, where modeling is really determined as running a t-test or a correlation or an ANOVA, etc. And much of the time is spent on communication and visualizing. Very little of the time is actually spent on importing, tidying, and transforming data. But the issue is that those are actually quite large areas of the analysis, and those are actually error prone, and they have a very time-consuming factor within them. What you end up with is this iceberg of reproducibility, where students in their final year are very good at analyzing data if it is in the right format, but there's these many different steps underneath the surface that are never really taught or never really tested upon, where students really struggle. The idea of bringing together different Excel files or CSV files from different participants, loading them all into the one analysis, bringing them all into different means and standard deviations, and basically trying to get them into the shape required for the final analysis. This bit up here is really quite well done by students, but this bit down here is rather poorly done, or it's irreproducible, or may even be done by a supervisor or another member within the lab. And that kind of really goes against the idea of what the QAA suggests we should be coming away with, or should be coming away with. So what that leads us to is these ideas of no formal instruction or on structuring, transforming, and visualizing data, despite these activities being the most time-consuming, the most complex, and error-prone. This absence of formal instruction really leads to shallow reproducibility of final year projects at best. So although we're saying that our students be able to do this, we're teaching bad practice. But this also gives us overconfidence in some areas, as well as insecurity and negative self-image. I.e., students get to the final stage of their project and think, well, I should be able to do this, but I'm really struggling to even load in data. What have I missed? And in reality, it's that we've not taught them that point. And this lack of knowledge of reproducibility and issue in the field is really an issue that we want to think about. So we need to focus on the issues that have come in the past and help our students understand those issues so that they know how to fix those issues in the future or spot those issues in the future. And that's where really the idea of SiteHR came out of, these kind of ideas about the issues of the past and things we saw within our own program. So about 5-6 years ago, we developed SiteHR based on the idea of teaching essential data science skills to allow our students to work in a reproducible fashion. Things like really focusing on data visualization, data wrangling, and reproducible reports, all the time using real data sets. We think by teaching these basic skills that we all have as researchers at an undergraduate level from the get-go will mean by the time they get to the end of their degree, they're much stronger in producing reproducible research and research that will replicate. All of our materials are available at sitehr.github.io if you'd like to look at them. And I'm just going to spend the next couple of minutes raising a couple of key points about them. First, one key point that we talk about is that we use R, which is obviously a coding language, as our main tool. But I'm really emphasizing the fact that R is our tool that we use to teach skills we want our students to have, right? This is our students what we want, a whole toolbox of different skills, and we use R to teach that skill. We're not teaching R, we're teaching skills within R, and that's a very key point that we always try to stick to. Basically, you have to be clear what it is you want your students to learn regardless of software. Software don't automatically make your students better at one thing or another. It's what you do with the software. So you have to know which skills you want your students to have, data wrangling, data visualization, and then find the software that allows you to do that best. One of the added benefits of R in RStudio, obviously, is being free to use, allowing for greater student independence. So they're not tied to working within a specific room, within a specific lab, or using a specific machine. Okay, but really, there are a few softwares around that are these days great at free. It's about whether they teach the skills or allow you to teach the skills you want your students to have, and that's whether you should use that software or not. Just to have a quick glance at one of our materials, this is one taken from our level 2 book, and it really just shows that it starts off with maybe here's a little bit of code, what this code does. This code just reads in some data. Try out the code yourself and then replicate it across 3 different data sets. There's click places that they can read additional information on to give them more idea about how the different functions work. But some of the key takeaway points from it are really things like use a novice-friendly syntax. We use what's called the tidyverse because it's a very readable syntax. It has words that make sense when you're actually trying to understand what the code does. Increase complexity and reduce hints as the chapters progress. We're trying to build mastery, so we remove the scaffolding as we go along the cohorts. Use real data sets wherever possible and integrate theory, research, terminology, as well as data skills. The idea behind that is there's good research coming out of people looking at stats anxiety about how do you actually get people to understand the importance of statistics. Well, you get them to use real data sets and you get them to act like psychologists like we would as researchers. So use real data sets, integrate theory research methods within your data and your research methods and stats teaching to show the worth of research methods and statistics within psychology. And allow for formative self-assessment with solutions at the end of the chapter to allow people to check themselves and to move on. Again, this idea of independence and mastery as we build up through the levels, okay? We're not scaffolding them all the way through. We have to take away the apron strings at one point. And just finally on this section here, you might be thinking, well, that's really good for your students, but maybe your students are different from ours. This is really just to point out that at Glasgow, we start off with 500-600 in first year, and these are split across 3 different colleges. Well, really 4 different colleges, sorry, but 3 main colleges: arts, social sciences, and sciences. And you can think of these as very diverse people who may or may not have covered statistics or maths or whatever sort of related ideas at school level. I may have very different experiences, maybe focus on English, business, or chemistry and biology. So we're teaching a wide range of different people within our cohort. The idea, however, is across all different years, we build the skills as we go, focusing on becoming confident and competent. We keep everyone at the same level to begin with. We build up their data wrangling and visualization skills to build a solid foundation in these key skills before moving on to analysis. So you see in level 2 is when we start to get into the inferential analysis. It's okay to slow it down, is what we're saying. You do not have to teach everything. In fact, the best thing to do is teach a few things well rather than teach a lot of things poorly.
Hello, I'm Helena Patterson and I'll be presenting the next part of the talk. We do so much more than teach students coding. We've integrated reproducible research methods throughout the curriculum in psychology. And here I'm going to talk a little bit more about the assignments that we use as a case study of how we do this. When Manafo and colleagues wrote their Manifesto for Reproducible Science in 2017, they called on colleagues to look more holistically at reproducible research, to look at it from many different perspectives and at various different stages within a research project. And we were taken by this, we were impressed by this, and so we've developed assessments based around this idea of breaking things into smaller parts, but also on making student assessment much more authentic. For instance, they talked about distributed student projects and how that could be a part of students' work contributing towards reproducible science, and registered reports, which breaks down the writing of a research report into smaller parts. However, things don't just start with research methodology. It's actually integrated throughout our curriculum, as I said earlier. So, for instance, in the lecturing courses, you would often find that people refer to reproducible research and generalizability of research beyond just the participants that took part in it. So we encourage students to think about methodology and how it can be replicated and reproduced in exactly the same ways, and what it means. So taking a critically evaluative look at the methods on which our science is based. So, for instance, in terms of some of the essay questions that our pre-honors are asked, here are just some examples of things that are not asked necessarily specifically to do with research methods, but might be asked on other courses or what people perceive as other streams. And certainly in social psychology, I tend to ask students, I have a allo that asks students to look specifically at the reproducibility and generalizability of research in social psychology. We've also developed a number of assignments based specifically around reproducibility and the materials that people are increasingly making available as part of the drive towards making reproducible research. For instance, we developed a peer review task in which we ask students to peer review papers that have been uploaded as preprints. Okay, so before they're published, and while there's no published reviews of them, students can have a look at these papers and they can evaluate them in terms of the science. We lead them through this. We've developed some materials that lead students through this process and helps them to think about critical questions that they need to be asking at each stage. It helps students to see that articles are not error-free. Even things that people think are publishable are not error-free. And so it gives them some confidence in their own work as well. It lets them develop a healthy skepticism of peer and published research, knowing that they can do these things themselves and seeing what the process involves. But it also develops their writing skills because they can see examples of other people's writing and they have to interact with that in quite a detailed way. It also helps with their critical thinking surrounding methodology and professional courtesy, turning the things that they want to say into something that you want to share with somebody else. And this is made possible because there are open access peer reviews that students can have a look at to see how things are done, and preprints that are freely available. We have a poster about this if you want to read a little bit more about it. And then based around registered reports, we have developed a project for our level 2 students. Where we give them some starter introductory ideas, and they have to develop an introduction and methods for a new research question. So the focus is really on that research question and their methodological approach, and not necessarily on the data outcomes that are going to come out of that, because we don't ask them to gather data for it. It develops students' understanding of the justification, design and rationale for experiments, and so they can critique those in other experiments as well, and it encourages them towards planning and thinking about reproducibility right from the start of a project. And then for their second project, we get students to do a secondary data analysis and pre-registration, and that is to a known data set, or that is to a published data set. So there's a number of data sets that we have gathered within the school or that people have gathered within or that other people have put online. And so there's a lot of data out there that can be used for this kind of project. And the students are expected to develop a new research question related to this data. We don't ask them to make the same analysis as something that has been published before. They have to make a brand new research question and analyze that. It teaches them about documenting an analysis plan and how to deal with deviations from that. It helps them to show the worth of their skills, the coding skills that they are learning, because by this stage they've learned quite a lot of coding, but now they can apply it to a data set that they've never seen before. And it also shows them just how big and messy data can be, but how they can actually cope with that very, very well. So that's quite a nice project, which affords lots of really interesting discussions and conversations with students around the idea of just, so if you say that there weren't enough participants, what do you mean by that? How could these people have done a better job of that? Or how could you have done a better job of it? What is there power analysis, or is there previous research that will give you the evidence towards that? It leads people into thinking about different kinds of research, about false positives and negatives, about replications, and about exploratory versus confirmatory research. And so students also understand this within the context of something that they have control over, because it's a research question that they set, something that they're interested in. And so within that platform, they understand a lot better of the things that make research better and that make research reproducible. And students become more aware of these issues in research and how to do better in future assignments and in projects that they then do. And all of this is made possible because of the contributions and the generous work that lots and lots of different groups are doing to make research available online, to make data available online, to develop resources that allows people to share their work freely.
Hi everyone, thanks to Phil and Elena. I'm going to spend the last few minutes of the presentation today talking to you about creating community and the importance that plays when you're developing your curriculum and your research methods curriculum. I'm Heather, pleased to meet you all, and what we're going to talk about today is the importance of building a community. Now, you can change as much as you like, but we have to do it together. We know the importance of being socially connected with other people and experiencing things as a group. Having those other people there, and that being a mix of people, maybe having students, having staff and their peers together in a group is really important. And support creates that trust with people becoming more open to talk about things they're finding challenging and sharing their successes and working through problems as they encounter them. And that's one of the skills that we want our students to have, is to be able to identify what the issue is and know the best way and the best people to work with to overcome those barriers. So we have online communities, we have offline communities. So, for example, we have the seminar and workshop series called Methods in Meta-Science that's open to both staff and students to present ideas and ask questions. So again, it's not about taking these groups together and staff being on one side and students on the other, it's about everyone being on the same page. We have offline space, and obviously at the moment we have remote teaching in response to the pandemic, but this is just an example of a change that we've made that has made a difference in people connecting with each other. So, and they don't have to be complex, they don't have to be far-reaching. So the top picture there were our school's lab space, and we changed, rather from having students sitting on their own, you can see a number of students there sitting on their own at the computer working through a worksheet very individually on their own. We moved that to having much more, the setup in the labs, much more about people coming together around a table, discussing things, discussing with each other, the students discussing with each other, but also with the GTA staff, which is what you can see at the bottom right there, but also as a class discussing together. And we have two very familiar lovely faces there. We have Phil and Elena in one of their level 2 labs. And actually what they're doing is, you can see, yes, the students are sitting about, but they are around the tables together. We have some that are working on computers, but we have all of them, and they're taking part in a class discussion. So Phil and Elena are actually listening to a student who's slightly off camera and is asking a question. So everybody's engaged. So group and being part of a group is very, very important. So even just changing the lab environment, but also creating environments where groups can come together. So in this same space, we've created the same online, is where people can come together and discuss their ideas and work with their peers to overcome issues, to discuss, to elaborate their thinking, and really just as we would work as colleagues within the same lab. We have offline spaces we've talked about. We also have online space. We have used Slack, and we're currently using Microsoft Teams very, very effectively, with a number of student-led channels where both students and staff can help out other students. But we have seen a lot of students answering each other's questions, pointing each other in the right direction, sharing materials, sharing resources, which is fantastic to see. To see it, staff don't necessarily give answers, but refer students back to previous assignments. Hang on a minute, we've done this before. Remember, we'll have a look back at this lab, or have a look back at this lecture. We've talked about this, maybe within another data set, or maybe within a different context, but we would never expect anyone to be going on and doing something that they haven't had support doing. Having staff-only channels can help transitions. Having that safe space where staff can go and go, what about this? Am I looking at this right? Has anybody got any resources for this? How are we tackling this? Again, is creating a really effective space for them. But acknowledge that not all students or all staff are from the same mould, and different people work at different speeds, need different support. We can't be good at everything all of the time. And I think that's an okay message to communicate to both staff and students. But the important thing is knowing how to tackle when you come up against something that is new, or you're unsure about, or you need a little bit of support. How do you go about asking for that? It's not the assumption that everybody has all of the answers right from the start, or we wouldn't be doing our jobs for the students, and we wouldn't be developing the staff members. So who can you go and speak to? Who has the right resources to help you work through these? And that's an important lesson for our students as they move into being graduates as well as our staff in career progression. So now I want to give you an example of how we have integrated some of our data skills into our practice, into our administrative practice, because it's important to integrate it where possible, to make it accessible and part of your practice. You get used to using something. So coding skills benefit staff both in terms of own research and keeping at the cutting edge of research practices, but also admin. And this is an example of the picture at the top of the screen there, where we have a CSV file where the students are, the staff, the markers, putting in their feedback over the 3 ILOs we have for our assessments, some feed forward and agreed. We can then, using the marker package, and the GitHub link is at the bottom of the screen there, we can use the marker package to take that CSV file and actually turn it into individual feedback for our students. In that feedback, you will get the individual feedback over our grade descriptors, over the 3 ILOs that are at the top of the CSV file, as well as down the left-hand side of the feedback there, and also generic feedback. And we can even build in so the students get the distribution of grades over the different questions as well to see where they're sitting. So we're integrating that into our practice that has obviously effects for things like ERISs, for student feedback, but also for NSS, so really important markers. So just some final thoughts to wrap up. Changing a curriculum is challenging. Anything new is challenging and can be unsettling. But as long as you have a clear rationale why you're doing that, and you can explain that clearly to your students and to your team, that's really important. Make the most of it to teach them good practice in your field. So there has to be a clear rationale. We're not just teaching you this for laughs and giggles. This is why this will affect your, this will have a positive impact on your graduate skill set, for example. There is a learning curve for both staff and students, so make sure you show the benefits to both parties, but don't ever underestimate. Nobody is doing this alone. You are part of our School of Psychology. You are part of our department. We are making this move. This is why we are making this move, and that benefit is in this way. Working on things with student independence, set them tasks where they can work independently, create staff time, and does allow for better projects. But also don't be, as you go through this, don't be tempted to step in, and we have a hands off the keyboard policy, and the GTAs, the graduate teaching assistants in our labs, they have an incredibly important role because they create that bridge between staff and students, and our student feedback certainly highlights the important role that they feel students can trust staff as well, but students feel that they can go to them if they're slightly more unsure, they wouldn't want to approach a staff member. But we're very clear, it's not the GTA or our staff role to go onto the keyboard and go, you just do this. That takes away from the learning experience. Have a think back. Where could you possibly have done something like that before? Have you done the pre-lab activity? Let's have a look there and see what we did there. How can we adapt that? So again, it's about facilitating these critical thinking skills. Not everyone's in the position to make these wholesale changes. Find one small thing you can change and that will benefit your students. Start there. Just to finish on the student perspective, obviously that is one of the most important voices around the table when we're looking at this. I just wanted to highlight, I'm sure we'll be sharing these slides, but I just wanted to highlight this bit at the bottom from student 2. Although challenging at first, perseverance with the principles and tools of open science and reproducibility will open so many opportunities during your undergraduate and beyond. It's like a muscle grip. The more you work it, the stronger it gets, and you'll see the results. Thank you to all the team and our community for working with us on this, the staff and the students, and we're happy to take any questions.